Okay, we'll just give people a few minutes to jump on, and it's going pretty quickly here. I'm watching as people are logging in. So hello to those of you who registered and are attending this virtual program with the Millicent Rogers. And I always like to start by saying at the Millicent Rogers Museum, we are located on traditional ancestral Puebloan lands of the people known today as the Red Willow people of Taos Pueblo. And for that, we are very thankful. I'm Karen Chertok, Director of Education at the Millicent Rogers Museum. And Millicent Unplugged is a virtual program intended to expand the voice of our community through shared dialogues, conversations, and storytelling in the spirit of friendship. Real people with real stories woven through the landscape of arts and cultures. Tonight's topic is New Mexico tourism, renovation, restoration, and reopening. And I want to first thank my friend Sarah Francis for being here tonight. And congratulations, Sarah, for your interview in Faces on the Front Range in the Denver Post this past Monday, was it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations. And together, Sarah and I welcome our guest panelists, Angelisa Murray, Ilona Spruce, and we were expecting Carolyn Schneider. And so first I will say Carolyn has about a 3-week-old baby. And so this is her first child. If she is able to jump on, we will certainly welcome her into the conversation. But as of right now, she hasn't logged in. So welcome Angelisa and Ilona. Taos is Angelisa's hometown. She's the founder and CEO of Heritage Inspirations, and Ilona Spruce is the Taos Pueblo Director of Tourism. New Mexico is a state heavily dependent on tourism. We are a destination. In Taos, we are a destination within a destination. And to take it one step further, each element in our community, be it museum, restaurant, gallery, or hotel, is a destination within a destination within a destination. Now, why is this important? It's important because people don't pass through, people arrive. And this is part of what allows us to greet them with smiles and say, you're here. And it's, you know, it's wonderful. So we're gathering this evening to just have some conversation with our local tourism people and Sarah Francis, my moderator. So Sarah, do you want to get started?
I do. And may I give you a shout out? Miss Karen has withstood the most extraordinary amount of phone calls and Zooms back and forth to make these panels happen over time. And so I get to sit up here and just have fun with you ladies, and she has to do all the work. So giving Karen the thumbs up without doubt. So
you know what? I want to interrupt really quickly also, sorry. But we do, I want to say hello to our local KCEI radio audience who will be listening to this because Mike Tilley contacted and asked if he could record it. So he will be recording it. And Mike, if you're already on, just be patient with me because while Sarah kind of takes the reins, I'm going to find you here and allow the recording. Thanks.
So if I may begin, it occurred to me that both you ladies are both advocates and activists for this wonderful area of northern New Mexico that we all love. Of course, my knowledge of the area starts in the late 50s. And though I have never been a full-time resident, over those years, it's certainly been a love affair. And I know what you do is you're looking to create bonds, to influence and inform learning, moving on from the past, honoring the past, but rather than maintaining or continuing a to foster a divisiveness that rankles on all sides. I see you ladies as really working to an opening, a friendship, a continuity that certainly we see in Native American prayers that honor and ask for blessings for all people, not just Puebloans. So I'm giving honor to you in what you do and have continued to do this. So Ilona, I want to ask you if you will lead off. And my question, it's kind of half a question and half a statement of how I see things, and I'm looking for your input. I see 7 different A's. So A for the very best. And it starts with acknowledgement of past and present, assimilation, that's bad and good, assemblage of so many different peoples and cultures, accountability for past, acceptance, access, and of course, appropriation of wonderful things, as in, for instance, our great jewelry that we all love. And would you be so kind as to talk to how you see tourism and outreach into the community?
Hi, thank you everybody for having me this evening. Can you all hear me good? There's kind of an echo in here. Okay, so the Pueblo has been technically doing tourism for about 100 years now, and that has to do with even prior to that, prior to even contact, we always had trade that came through the community. And so all that's done is transitioned into a new body, and it's transitioned to have different labels attached to it now. But we've continuously allowed and welcomed people into our home for generations. And so the way I see it is that the Taos community in whole has definitely lived and breathed off of tourism. It's a part of who we are. It's built into the land. It's built into the community, and it's here. It's not going to go away, but there is a way to maneuver it, and there is a fine line of how we welcome it and how we reel it in. Tourism in its nature is invasive, but it's how we use it to our advantage in order to maintain economy, maintain the story that is being told. And that's how I see tourism today for the Pueblo, is that it's a tool. It's a tool that we can use to tell the story from the Native perspective rather than somebody else telling our story. And we get to do it in our very own home, which is very unique. And we, the Pueblo, since we've been bringing people from all over the world into our home, we have a unique foundation or platform to be able to tell that story. And we not only tell that story from our perspective, but we also have the ability to tell that story utilizing, a physical space, which is our home. So sometimes people always ask, how do you feel about, people coming into your home? It's so invasive and whatnot. But I take it as it's a different kind of platform that we can immerse them in the story rather than teaching them something in a separate space, which is what COVID has led us to having to do, is teaching people in a separate space. But it's also allowed us to reclaim the space that we have within the Pueblo area. And what I mean by that is we have been allowing people into our home in the traditional tourism, standard for about 100 years. And so for the first time in that time frame, we've closed our doors to the public. And so in order to maintain safety, in order to maintain the community and our elderly population and whatnot. And so, you know, we've really been able to take back that space and see and evaluate what we really want to do moving forward. And I think, you know, the main word that comes to mind is accessibility. And it's really monitoring the accessibility into our community from here on out, rather than before we kind of just went with, you know, go with the flow, letting people come in. In 2019, we saw about 130,000 people come through the tourism gate at the Pueblo. And that's not including like San Geronimo Feast Day or Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, any of the days that we don't charge aren't included in those numbers. So that number could be well over into 150,000 people came through our home. That's a lot of people for a community our size. And
I think one of the most important things you just said, if I may move forward here just a bit, is that the accessibility and the spatial experience that the Pueblo graciously allows us, even just looking at your picture, my hands remember the touch of the homes, and that dimensionality is something that even as a preteen just struck me. And Angelisa, that's what I understand you do in the design of your tours, that it's very hands-on. I mean, it sounds very grade school, and yet it's not, because we don't know. And it is so gracious the way you have designed things. Talk about where did your idea come from to do these tours that are totally experiential?
Thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor to be here and just great company. So I think one of the things that Ilona pointed out to me that is one of the most necessary components of tourism is that the voices of our culture, our heritage, and our history come from those that it is born into. And the opportunity for us is that we, you know, in crafting these experiences, we're stewards of this land, of these stories, and the opportunities lie there with people. And, you know, it's easy to take somebody to the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge and to show them the splendor and the wonder, to show them a place like Taos Pueblo. And I think the real passion for me has been finding those partners that we can align with that'll allow us to really go deeper. And often with tourism, and you know, when you're exploring a place, there's so many components of wonder, of curiosity, and even taboo. And especially as we get into these culturally sensitive pieces, and a lot of times people, first of all, in New Mexico, can't pronounce things. They have a hard time identifying different locations because we do have so many vivacious historical places that are hard to pronounce. So, but in terms of, you know, the passion behind what builds these tours is the visceral component to connect one to the culture, to the land in an intimate way. And the creativity that comes from that really comes from my team. For me, what I always felt traveling and working in the different elements that I did and the different places around the world, what brought me to life throughout travel was always culture. It's always connection back to why a place is significant and the opportunities that I had to learn from that place. And travel is a conduit to inspire others. So that's always the great thing in terms of the development of what it is that we're actually doing. And then really trying to find those things that are authentic and immersive. It's funny, over the years, these words have become kind of buzzwords in the travel industry. I mean, even when I started Heritage Inspirations 7 years ago, we weren't saying experiences, we were saying tours. And that's really started to become kind of the popular thing to say. And then immersive connects the soul. It peels back the layers. It impacts you when you're traveling around to have these questions to understand. And then when you go home, you have these memories and these connections, and ultimately bring you back to that place and so forth. So it's an honor what we get to do. I mean, the problem with it is I have so many ideas. I don't know how to get them all out and how to.
Well, do you realize that you are actually, with the backplate that you are using, you exemplify what both you and Ilona are speaking of, because the thing that is so beautiful about northern New Mexico is that there is so much that is right there in your face and you can see. So the extraordinary Pueblo buildings, and behind you is the Horno. And so everybody can see that. But what makes the difference is the bread in front. And that's our connection to the real people. That's where this experience is so important. And where else can we find something that brings the past and the culture right up, and we get to see it today in a way that practically nowhere else, even with reenactment elsewhere in the country. And I can't say enough about what you are doing that is so different and so valuable. And Ilona, if I may ask you, part of our talk today is about the reconstruction, and obviously working to preserve the physical buildings of the Pueblo is a big deal. And can you tell us about how traditional methods are being preserved and how you see that goes forward?
So today things have changed with the Pueblo. Traditionally, individual families took care of each home, and they're still passed down from one generation to the next. But today, it's more of a collective effort, where now we've instituted programming within the tribe to maintaining the multi-storied buildings because of not only the status, but the way of what they represent in the community. And so they're maintained through a preservation program within the community, and that's operated through tribal funds or grant funding. And those are the multi-storied buildings, though exclusively. The individual homes are still owned and maintained by the individual families. And the multi-storied buildings are still owned by families. It's just the maintenance part is taken care of collectively. And it's still done traditionally with the mud and straw and doing the mixing and the gathering and whatnot. And then the family comes together and fixes the home. Every family does it usually before feast day, and it's still maintained. So, and that you know,
I want to interrupt a little bit. Sorry. Sorry, Sarah, but I want to circle back a little bit because somebody had a question about really wanting to hear, and you expand, Ilona, about the Pueblo's views on the value of tourism, the views on tourism.
So, like I was saying, is that the Pueblo utilizes the foundation as like an educational tool. There are times where it is invasive, but that's why we've created the tourism department in order to regulate that component of tourism. And we've worked really hard on creating relationships with the town, whereas before we kind of maneuvered in this silo. But I think now having partners and working together closely, much more with the town, with the surrounding area, the ski valley, with anyone who has any kind of tourism hub to share information, working with tour groups like Angelisa. Basically, what we're creating is smaller educational hubs for people to understand what the Pueblo is. And when they do come into the community, for them to have at least a general grasp. I'm not wanting them to know the full history or to understand us completely, but at least to have a general grasp in order to maintain respect when they come onto tribal lands.
Exactly.
And so I think that's truly the job of tourism, of the tourism department for the tribe, is educating people and making sure that when they do leave from our home, that they have at least a general grasp, not only of Taos Pueblo people, but also of Native people in general, or Indigenous people. A lot of times we still see people who don't realize that Native people are even in existence. And so when they leave from our home, they have a general idea that, yes, there are tribes and there's a lot of Native people that live amongst everybody. And they get a general idea and history of why there isn't as many of us as there probably used to be. So it gives like a general idea. And a lot of times people do continue to explore and wanting to learn. And that's where Angelisa has been such a great resource for us with the smaller intimate tours, is we're able to go into a more in-depth history, understanding. And, you know, like with everything else, the kind of audience that Angelisa attracts in those smaller specific tours is that they already have an understanding that there's going to be limitations to their experience, but we're going to give them an experience that they won't ever have anywhere else except with us. And that's the idea. And it doesn't mean that we have to share anything culturally either. We can totally stay away from those sensitive subjects and the things that the Pueblo chooses not to share with the public. And we do it in a good way. And I think ultimately that's like the greatest comeback, is hearing someone saying that they're really appreciative of what they've been able to have with us.
May I give a shout out to your guides who work tirelessly in the Pueblo when people come and answer questions. And see, that's the same thing, is Angelisa's guides are people who have known the community, known the various areas, are artisans themselves. And so that's one of the biggest values for both of the way you regulate, if that's the right word, of the tourism, is to make sure that the right relationship has been established. Where do your guides come from, Angelisa?
What we really try to do is to have as many people that were born and raised in New Mexico as we possibly can. We're telling a New Mexican story. And so that's always my hope, is to have people from their own regions be inspired to share with others, and to also learn deeper about their own culture. This is a very profound, impactful way of life. And when you're a guide, you put on, 20 different hats. So you are not only an educator, you are also in alliance with simple things like you can't have a fun vacation if it's not safe. You're transporting people, so you're being, articulate and communicative during a time that you're keeping people safe. What I try to do, and really what I do in terms of how we move our guests or our guides around, I always say that my guides are my guests. They become our internal, sort of tribe, our own family. And the opportunity is that, if you think about it anywhere, I mean, in Taos, everybody has a different way of growing up, even though we all grow up in a same area kind of thing. So if you think of it in that way, everybody has different passions. Some are intrigued by geology. Some are intrigued by the cultural components. Some are love affairs of the adventure world and raft guides, or, you know, just passionate about the outdoors, and playing off of people's skill sets, playing off people's passions, and molding and really mentoring them into something deeper is where the rich part starts to come out. Because for me now, across the years, when I'm like, literally today, I was with one of my guides on our Taos Artisan walking tour. And I don't know how many times I've been on that tour. I don't know how many times I've heard certain people talk about the TSA, and no, not, as Rich Nichols says, not the one that gropes you, but the one that, you know, the Taos Society of Artists. But just hearing it from my guide perspective and hearing it from the galleries and from the artists in their galleries, every single time I learn something on my own tour, and each of these guides add a different value of authenticity to their own voice. And that is what we cultivate. When it comes to those things where people are dropping their mind into their heart and they're speaking out in that effort with a real consciousness about their surroundings, about our culture, about the opportunity that we even have to extend the story of the areas that we're navigating in, it becomes something very contagious. And so what I encourage my guides to do, in fact, we go next week, I'll have my annual guide training where we all get together and we talk about what's coming up this year. We get everybody, you know, kind of on board with the training and so forth. But the number one thing that I want them to do is to go experience each other's tours, because every one of them is an educator in their own element. And we have people who are retired in their 70s. We have people who are in their young 20s working for us. And for me, it's really about that innate part of somebody that wants to inspire and tell what is so amazing and magical about New Mexico. I mean, there's so many incredible things to curate, to organize, and so forth. So our guides become the rock of the tours, of everything that it is that we do, and they become what we say. And maybe we just say that because of my Hispanic background and my family is, we are a tribe. And what does a tribe do? It supports one another. It elevates each other. Coming from other guiding backgrounds that I've been in, there's been, you know, sort of the antithesis of that, where there can be competitiveness but for me, what I feel like is it's really about nurturing and strengthening one another's skills, so that when they're out there in the field, when I can't tell you, the guest that comes on a Heritage Inspirations tour is a guest that oftentimes comes back again and again and again, or they go across 3 to 5 different tours. So they're literally traveling with different members of our family. And because of that, it becomes intimate. It becomes something that feels very soulful, very real, just like you would go into your grandmother's home. And in my grandmother's home, the smell of homemade tortillas and red chili is like none other in the world. And that's how you want people to feel, like they have a sense of coming home in New Mexico, even if they've never been here, it's their first time.
If I can build on that very quickly, Angelisa, you answered most of our own Rick Romancito's questions that came in on the chat. He says, many people have certain assumptions, and I do hope we're past the question of, well, where are the teepees? Nevertheless, I'm sure you both have some funny stories about what people thought and how you've managed to educate them differently. Is Ilona, you want to comment? Anything there?
I'd actually like to weigh in on that for just a moment.
Okay.
So first I want to say, Angelisa, some folks were asking about your background, and so I wanted to answer that verbally. If you want to tell people what your photo is and what is in the background.
The background picture is a picture
Orno, yeah,
from one of the Orno baking tours that Ilona and I created together over like 2.5 years.
and the bread.
And that is Orno bread.
Mhm.
Yes, that is behind me. Yeah, what is my background, meaning like where am I from? And
No. I meant actually your physical background on the Zoom meeting.
okay, yeah, that is literally
Thank you.
that is the Orno at Tiwa Kitchen that we used that day. It was a beautiful day of baking. Yeah.
And I thank you, Angelisa. And I also want to weigh in a little bit on Rick's question that he typed in about tourism. I think that, you know, as a museum, we have a unique opportunity to engage with a lot of people for short periods of time. And man, you're just trying to get all the information you can is somehow, you know, the energy that often happens with especially large tour groups. And what I have learned is that people are so open, and maybe it's the advent of the level of technology that's happened, but people are very open to the understanding that there are layers and complexities to all cultures, all people. And that, I think what Rick was trying to say is, you know, people who have their own hangups about what their cultural narratives are, and, you know, how do we navigate this? And I think it always comes down to, which is kind of like what you're saying, Angelisa, the individual people. So we talk about tourism and generalizations, but it always comes down to who you saw today and who you spoke to today. And those relationships seem to be what kind of meld and form the whole energy of this, you know, place we call Taos. And Sarah, I also want to mention to you, because I don't think I've ever even told you this, so many of our large group tours originate in Denver.
Yes.
So there's an
I
interesting
suppose
connection.
that was the case.
Yeah, they fly
yes.
into Denver and then they come to Taos. So I wasn't sure if you knew that. So before I hand it off to somebody else, I do want to acknowledge Lolly. Hi, Lolly. We saw you in the chat. So happy that you're here, and we're looking forward to seeing your groups this year. So Ilona, I want to say I'm really happy, as I'm sure a lot of people are, about the Taos Pueblo collaboration with the visitor center reopening and the artworks that are going to be there. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit, because I just think that's so huge to be able to open that again, and how and why it's being opened.
So everybody who lives in Taos probably saw the newspaper that there's a collaborative effort happening with the town and the Pueblo with opening the formerly Taos Visitor Center to the public again, but it'll showcase artists from the Pueblo, and we'll also probably end up using it as a visitor center hub anyway. The intent was just to give a platform to artists from the Pueblo to be able to continue to sell their wares. And this had been discussed even last year, but because of the ups and downs with COVID and even some of the artists not wanting to sell, we just kind of prolonged the process. And then finally, now we're kind of in this hopefully safe area of being of artists being more comfortable with coming out and wanting to sell their wares. And it's been 2 years since the Pueblo has closed its doors and hasn't opened back up, which has totally taken a hit on our artists and the economy that's within the Pueblo walls itself. And so this will give the opportunity for people to be able to start selling their wares and start being more even for the community itself, for us to, and even for me, to start working with people again. It's been, you know, I can't say it's been that awful being closed either, because it has been nice, but I will say I never thought I would miss visitors the way that I do. Seeing new faces all the time, and then you get to a point where no one new is coming in. So I think you know, the big thing is that it's a good foot in the door to start maneuvering COVID for the community too. And we've created hubs kind of all over town is what we've done. I've worked with Millicent Rogers, with you guys, with the curator here, with Michelle. And we have a Pueblo exhibit room here, just to kind of help with the storytelling as well. History of the community, and Millicent also has a great collection from the community. So it was only obvious to do something with you guys as well. Then we still have the Return of Blue Lake exhibit up in Harwood. And we also have in support of him, we've also supported Lyle Wright in opening up Lyle's creations within the plaza area for artists to be able to sell through his efforts. And so, you know, it's been definitely a task on maneuvering things, but I think now that we have the visitor center, we'll be able to open up a bigger, just a bigger space for people to be able to sell. We're probably going to fit anywhere from like 15 to 20 people in there. It's a pretty big space. And so I'm excited, and we'll be able to help people to everywhere else and be able to answer questions and continue on with at least having a little bit of a door open to the Pueblo, or at least being able to talk to people and giving people the ability to have contact with us. So, because
Ilona, do you know what the other Pueblos are they kind of reaching out in a similar way within larger communities, or?
I'm not too sure. I know that a lot of the Pueblos along, it's hard for them because they have the highway, they have I-25 going through their lands, the majority of them. So it's hard for them to close off completely close off their community. And so either they've maneuvered and figured out how to deal with the traffic going through their lands or through their community, and now they're in a place where they are starting to open, or they're still like us, where they're not opening at all. The only things that are open are like their gas stations and casinos.
And did you already speak to that? Did I miss it about not opening or opening?
No. So there is a plan to talk about opening, and it does have to go through our tribal council, and it has to be decided through that, I guess through those steps. And so once we have that decision, everybody will know when we're going to open. I'm hoping that we will open sooner than later, but that's truly not my decision. And it's truly in the hands of what we feel is safe enough for us to open and allow people back into the community. And I also feel like it's truly a comfort not to have tribal members coming in contact with visitors randomly, because that happens a lot within the Pueblo. I mean, when we allow people to come into the community, they're truly coming into the heart of our home. And so that's a huge reason of why we haven't opened back up. And so big decision.
My good friend, Antonia Lujan, who has her shop and home on the south side, I know she is missing the visitors and the income, which she recently supported the entire cost of renovating her family's home herself, and did a good deal of the work. And so it's very important to the younger artisans, because their public was just taken away, basically, due to only the fault of the closures, unfortunately. And of course, what I would love to see, we always volunteer at powwow, and that's one of the greatest funds of being able to come. And I've not heard from Deb Lujan whether there is any possibility.
The power will depend on the Pueblo, and that's how that'll happen.
Well, and it should be.
Yeah, so truly, And it'll reopen the idea of opening that part of tribal lands too, because right now everything's closed off. The only exits in and out is on Veterans Highway, and then we have an exit on Hale Creek by the gas station. So everything else to enter and exit has been shut off. And so now when we do open, those are the other components that we have to get ready for, is that we will open, if we decide to open, how will we open? How much accessibility do we want to give again to people? It's hard for community members. We have tribal members who live like going on 150 up to the Ski Valley area or to Seco. And I couldn't imagine living on that part of the Pueblo, because you got to come all the way back in and then go back out. And you do that every day. And you do it on a dirt road. So I know that there is talk of wanting to open the village, especially because, like Sarah mentioned, the financial component. But we just have to weigh things out at this point.
Well, it has to be a consensus, certainly, and we honor that. If I may move ahead, Angelisa, I have a comment and question that perhaps you can help. Jean Nichols has written in talking about the Wool Festival and how that, I was not aware that it has been kind of pushed elsewhere, south to Santa Fe. Is this something that you would find that visitors are attracted to, and that you would take people around? I would probably go up to Tierra Wools or farther past Abiquiu, but this would be a way that you get artisans right in the same place. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really sad. Karen and I worked on this last year. I usually have large groups that come from New York, and they come for the festival and really want to build upon their experience as they're having that. And it's a great opportunity because we, showcase a lot of the galleries that give context to all of the different weavings that we have. It's just such a great illustrative component. For us, we're not necessarily host typically large groups. We're very, focused on that pint size, but that's when those focused groups that come here really looking to bond and to dive themselves deeper, and not to mention the impact of that economical component where people are actually buying yarn here and inspired and buying art. And it's a big part of that October date. And they even started to extend past the Wool Festival. This last year, we had, Karen, like 3 large groups that came from that from October to November. And, one of those opportunities is, of course, we bring them here to Millicent Rogers and this wonderful illustration to start that story. But I didn't know that they had actually canceled it. So it's sad.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that exactly what was in the chat. So I'll just kind of recap that. And that was up in the chat. So I'm not going to pull it back down to read it, but essentially there were just difficulties in negotiating with the town and Kit Carson. And so they moved. And so the question actually that the person was chatting in was, at what point does the town get to weigh in? The town meaning the people, not the town, the town government, but the people. When and how and what platforms do we get to weigh in to say what kinds of tourism we want? And I think that's a really great question. And I would like to just kind of respond to that. That very question is sort of part of the reason why we decided to do this type of virtual programming of Millicent Unplugged, because the idea behind it was we just need to be people conversing again, you know, and coming out of the pandemic, people are wondering, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? You know, and yeah, we're almost a year out now from when we first started to reopen. But the fact is, things have changed. And to me, even Zoom is one, we tend to not really like the virtual platforms because we had to do it so much. But I guess I have to say, you know what, that kept us seeing people's real faces, you know, without masks. And so I think that these kind of conversations, I know there's also in Talpa, the coalition group that's Anita Rodriguez is involved with. And that's another, you know, meeting place or platform that community members can have conversations about these things. I also think, to shift a little bit, but still be on that same question, this is part of why we wanted to talk about tourism. What challenges and what changes are we seeing or have we seen? I know one of the things at the museum, because we have a lot of land out here, so we're certainly thinking about reimagining how can we best utilize that for our community, you know. And so we're looking in terms of programmings, what kinds of things are needed. And it might be that some of those programs, we're just all in a transition, and maybe they'll shift to other areas.
And
Like
I think that what's so exciting about this is that it caused us to take a breath back and to really also consider our values and our ethos in terms of tourism. I mean, being a person who had taken multiple different types of groups and working with Ilona over the years, going to the Pueblo, I think there's a beautiful breath there of taking a step back, of understanding the reverence of such a culture that allows us to be able to go in their doors in the first place and experience what it is that we do. This is where travel is such a, I mean, I own a travel company, but can be such an invasive component, and that the opportunities here is, as we said, the same thing, reimagining travel. And we didn't know if we were going to survive through COVID. And I went through really a deep, hard look at what are our opportunities? What is our mission? What are we doing? What's right? What's wrong? And to me, the greatest things came out of that experience. And a lot of our tours, or our tour events, as we call them, in collaboration with museums and collaboration with local partners, is really a response to something that is germinated out of a question of something that creates friction. And that's where it becomes fun, because you're already talking about, we live in New Mexico, and what are we? A state with a history built on colonialism. So do we talk about that big elephant in the room? Yes, we do. Do we bombard
You bet we do. We do in our realm too.
Right? And do we do it in a way that we make people feel guilty or bring this negativity to it? No, we find these beautiful outlets for people to deeply be inspired, to be impacted. And one of the things that I always found, I can remember multiple times that Ilona and I were on tour in the Pueblo, and when people go to such a place of culture, they immediately reflect back on their own culture. I mean, you have Jewish people reflecting on things that were similar to Puebloan life and remembering their great grandmother and these stories. And we would suddenly be like, oh no, we've been talking about, you know, the organic moments. And that's the thing about travel and transformative travel, is the organic spaces that can be a little awkward maybe, or that we don't know what the next steps are going to be. And the Pueblo may open in 2024 or in 2022. How can we be better stewards? How can we be greater at what it is that we're doing and tell richer stories, whether they are or they aren't open? And that's the opportunities that we're looking at, is if the Pueblo does or doesn't open, it still has an impactful, vibrant life living in this moment. And how can we tell those stories at the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, where their land is in juxtaposition, like a part of that whole monument? And
Yeah.
you can talk about unison there. You can talk about habitat and preservation and the reintroduction of river otters. You can talk about the bighorn sheep and all of these multiple components that is what make people go, oh my gosh, I want to come back. I want to learn more. And travel can impact things. Funding can come from things that people get impassioned by. And that is the greater story, is that you get somebody who comes in and, you know, with museums, you know, with nonprofits and so forth, we can help inspire that. And that's what we're trying to do through our tours, is connect them to the communities, to the stories. And a lot of that we do is through newsletters. We tell stories that aren't related to our tours, that give people a greater understanding of New Mexico in and without the tour audience, so to speak. So that's where I think the storytelling, the blogging, the collaboration, the creativity and the brainstorms, this is our hour to create the greatest next chapter of Taos Pueblo.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. And you know what, Angelisa, I love what you said, and I'm glad you brought it up, that, you know, these are living cultures.
Yeah.
These are cultures that are alive and dynamic.
Right now.
And we touch on that at the museum almost daily, and whether it's verbally through, you know, the tour giving, or sometimes it's just more nuanced than that, and it's through the artifacts. And, you know, yes, this is the pottery, the ancestral pottery. And look, here's Gavin Gonzalez's pottery, you know, and so it helps people understand that this isn't a place where you come and you look and, oh, isn't this nice, these ancient things and these ancient lifeways. No, they hit up against that constantly, that these are living cultures. And Ilona, I also want to mention to you that I don't know if you're watching the chat or not, but people are really happy about what you are saying and how you're talking and being honest about tourism can be invasive, and, you know, in agreement about this. And, you know, this is interesting to have this conversation, because there is such truth to that. And this is part of the beauty of Taos. It's part of the beauty of New Mexico, the complex, you know, fraught with violent and conflict history. And Ilona once said to me, but in the midst of all of that, you can bet there were Romeo and Juliet stories happening
all over the place.
So, you know, we can make these statements, and they can be conflicting statements, and they can be, you know, statements that are totally contradictory. And what we know here is that they can just sit there and be at peace, those statements, across your table. And then you move on. And, you know, so there's just something about being able to just acknowledge and allow those voices to be present. Don't you think, Ilona?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, we're at a time where we can acknowledge people and respect each other's stories, but still move on and collectively know that that's our history. But that's what makes, especially Taos, we always see it on the tours, like, or even people just coming in asking, like, how do you guys get along?
People often ask that.
And, you know, truly, it's just, you know, we all want to live here and we're not going anywhere. So we might as well as acknowledge and respect each other, and let's try and take care of the space. And I think that's really something that we're seeing in the younger generations, is that there's an initiative to take care of, you know, land, water, people, and culture that's here, whether it's Native, Hispanic, Anglo, however you want to sit down on the table, it's still what makes Taos. And that's what makes House Unique, from, even from Santa Fe. We've really come into a time where those pieces are really powerful for a younger generation, especially now. People are really trying to figure out where they're from and where they come from. Where a lot of us who live in the area, we can say, oh, our families are from here, or, in the surrounding area, or, like, we're able to learn from each other. And so I think that's the time and era that we're in, is people want to appreciate each other. And that's where we're at.
I have the opportunity to introduce 70 sixth graders to the northern New Mexico area in the next little bit, and they are going to come and experience, they get a full week in the area. And so naturally, I wanted to ask you about the demographics and the outreach to young people that you were just speaking about, Ilona. Do you have a lot of kids that come?
Oh yeah, we work with kids from all over, literally. Our big groups come actually from Texas. We have middle schools that come in from Lubbock all the way to Fort Worth. And then we have a bunch of schools that come down from Denver. And then we work together with a couple of the private schools in the inland area of California. And we also do and support a couple of their like raffles and sponsorships and that kind of stuff. And then we have, what we've started doing too is we have other native schools coming to the Pueblo. And we've done workshops, not only with the tourism component, but with our education department. And we've been able to create these platforms where, we're educating each other about our cultures, and there's truly a cultural exchange. And then we've even had children and young adults coming from South America who are coming up this way. Of course, that was all in 19, 18, 17. So, but, I'm hoping that we can continue that and keep maneuvering. During Zoom, during the Zoom era, we've done a lot of, I guess that's been the advantage with Zoom, is I've been able to do presentations all over the place.
Yeah.
And so
we're running out of time. We're running out of time, and I hate to stop you, Ilona, but I promised that we'd address some Q&A questions. And I just want to bring up, so there, who's the name? Jean is the one talking about the Wool Festival. And I guess I just feel compelled right now, and a certain amount of responsibility reading all of these, to at least put it out there, maybe this is a time for reimagining, because, like, for example, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this. We are going to be using our land differently. Maybe it's possible the Millicent Rogers could have some sort of little wool festival. Don't quote me on that, Mike Tilley. But, you never know. We are actually going to be getting an event tent that has already been approved, because we recognize the need for outdoor spaces and large groups to gather. So yeah, I will totally bring that up with Greta and see what her response is, because I think, in all fairness, that's sort of a community responsibility that this museum should at least take a look at. So thanks, Jean. And also, let's see what else. Angelisa, what are your goals for 2022? That's in the Q&A.
Oh, I think she's already answered all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a list above one's head how much you want to do.
And just really quickly, another comment about the green tourism. Glad that it came up and that we're mentioning this. So I do want to say, I wish Carolyn had been here, and maybe we'll do this exact same panel with the level of interest and when the baby's a little bit older, and she'll be able to join us, because that is part of her philosophy with the Hotel Willa. And I think that a lot of people would be interested to know what's happening on that front with the Hotel Willa. So thank you, everybody, the attendees and the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. taospueblo.com. I didn't type these in, but I'm just saying these are all easy websites. If you want more information, taospueblo.com. And Angelisa is heritageinspirations.com. And then if you want to check out Hotel Willa, it's hotelwilla.com. So the museum's open 6 days a week right now. We're closed on Wednesdays. Every other day we are 10 to 5. And Ilona, when is TPAWS, the Taos Pueblo Winter Showcase? 11th,
Winter
12th,
Showcase.
13th.
March.
March 11th, 12th, 13th. Yeah.
Not this
So-
weekend.
Right. Thank you, Sarah. So appreciate you. And Sarah's got a new book coming out, Tales from Taos and Beyond, Voices, Unplugged Voices of Art and Life. So
All kinds of people doing all kinds of jobs, funny stories, interesting things. We, at this point, as of today, there are 74 narratives included in the book.
wow.
And we are growing. I have at least 30 more people who want to contribute something of their idea of what
Great.
the Four Corners and Taos is all about. So thank you all. We'll
And
see you
Ilona,
next.
thank you so much. Angelisa, thank you. And hi, Lolly. I keep wanting to say hi to Lolly.
Lolly.
Good to see you, Lolly. We'll see you soon. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.